Okay, hi, how are you? Um, a couple of months ago, actually around the time when Keith Olbermann suddenly ended his show, I wrote a blog post that said that each of us as liberals should strive to sort of find our own inner Keith Olbermann. Okay, that whenever we find an issue that we feel passionately about, we should actually try and write about it, try and express it, try and have our own special commentary on it. In that vein, this particular blog post, I am actually going to have an accompanying video on it. And this is that video. Now, I am going to give you a couple of caveats. First of all, I'm an amateur at this, so uh, forgive any gaffes in advance. Secondly, I am actually reading from a Word document most of this, and it is going to look like I'm reading the Word document. So yeah, I am going to be pulling a Michelle Bachman here, looking downward at the document, just so you'll know. And thirdly, the glasses are not any kind of homage to Keith Olbermann. I actually need them to see. I wear glasses. So, with all of that in mind, here goes. All right. Ever notice how whenever President Obama seems to be doing one thing that pisses off the left, it turns out to be something totally different that ends up flummoxing the right? How what initially seems to be capitulation to the right-wing extremism is actually a clever strategy to box them into a corner with very few options. Take last December's deal with the GOP that extended the Bush tax cuts. The left was furious that Obama would dare compromise with the Republicans when it turned out that the majority of Americans who don't hang on Keith Olbermann's every word were actually okay with it, given the alternative of their unemployment running out and their taxes being raised. Then there was the most recent budget deal, which saved Planned Parenthood and NPR and kept the government from shutting down. Obama gave John Boehner, by the way, Mr. Boehner, where are the jobs? $39 billion in budget cuts, more than the GOP initially asked for. At least that's what they thought. As it turns out, the real figure for 2011, according to the Congressional Budget Office, was something like $350 million. Obama gets them again. Now, today, after years of listening to the screechings coming from the birthers, led most recently by Donald Trump and his hair, President Obama finally releases his long form birth certificate. In a press conference during which he took no questions, he explained his reasonings thusly. I've watched with bemusement. I've been puzzled at the degree at which this thing has just kept on going. We are not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers, end quote. Now, I certainly don't need to take you through the history of this issue, which started with the 2008 primary campaign, worked its way through the airhead ravings of Orly Tates, and ultimately it resulted in several states proposing bills that would require candidates for president to present proof of them being born in this country in order to appear on their ballots. To her rare credit and to the chagrin of birthers in her state, Arizona Governor Jan Brewer vetoed such a bill, saying, quote, I never imagined being presented with a bill that could require candidates for the president of the greatest and most powerful nation on earth to submit their early baptismal circumcision certificates, among other records, to the Arizona Secretary of State. This is a bridge too far, end quote. A rare moment of sanity in what has otherwise been an insane leap off of the cliff of rational discourse into the abyss of chaos. But back to the birther issue. Obama's supporters, myself included, were initially furious that the president would, once again, kowtow to the insanity of a fringe group of right-wing nutjobs, led by a man whose companies have been bankrupt 4 times despite having an economics degree from the Wharton School, a man who is insanely jealous of President Obama because Obama got into the Harvard Law School while he, with all of his money, even then, could not. This is the man to whom Obama has caved. But we should look a bit closer. Did Obama really cave to this issue, or has he outsmarted the right once again by forcing their hand and bringing to light an issue that the mainstream media has been thus far terrified of covering? Quote, I know there's going to be a segment of people for which, no matter what we put out, this issue will not be put to rest, Obama said at a White House press event to release the birth certificate. Gee, you think? Of course they're not going to be convinced. He could have brought the birth goo from his mama's cooch, flavored with Hawaiian punch, and they still wouldn't have been convinced that he was human, let alone born in this country. And it doesn't necessarily help matters that a sizable portion of self-proclaimed birthers believe that Hawaii is another country. To be sure, the president is certainly not harboring any delusions that this issue is going to go away simply because he presented them with actual facts. In fact, he's counting on it not going away. By giving them the very thing they've been bitching for over the past 2 years, Obama has presented Trump, the birthers, the teabaggers, and their enablers in the Republican Party with an uncomfortable choice. They can acknowledge the birth certificate, admit they've been wrong all this time, and finally shut up about the issue, which would mean that Trump would have to find a real issue to run on, or they can keep the issue going and expose what most of us already know, that the issue of Obama's birthplace has absolutely nothing to do with Obama's birthplace. My money and Obama's calculation is on the latter. The denials have already begun. The CEO of WorldNet Daily, Joseph Farah, who incidentally has a book coming out in May, claims he paid for an army of detectives in Hawaii and provided information to Donald Trump. About the release of the birth certificate, he says, quote, "I think it will take us a little while to examine this and determine if it is legitimate. Birther Queen Orly Tate and her subjects have taken to questioning the long form because it lists the president's father's race as being African and not Negro, or, let's be real, nigger. Various other birthers, teabaggers, and Republican enablers have questioned every aspect of Obama's big reveal, from why it took so long to why he chose to do it now, all attempting to imply some insidious motive. This is going to continue. They really have no choice but for it to continue, because despite all of their protestations to the contrary, the birthers and their newly appointed prophet, Donald Trump, are nothing more than your basic garden variety dyed-in-the-wool racists. And the one truism throughout the entire history of race in this country has always been that racists need a smokescreen with which to cloak or justify their racism. Birthers are no different than any other racist hate group. And this is the real tragedy of the birther movement, the fact that they simply cannot fathom that an African American could not only become the President of the United States, but could beat out at least 30 other white candidates to get there. It has to have been because of affirmative action, or ACORN, or the blacks voting for a black guy, or voter fraud, etc. It couldn't possibly be because he was better than them. More than just prove that he was actually born in this country, and contrary to birther ignorance, Hawaii is a part of this country, what Obama has done was expose the birther conspiracy for what it is: simple and pure race baiting. And in doing so, he's forcing the Republicans to finally choose a side. Do they continue to court the crazies in their base, or do they back away from the issue once and for all? It also exposes another truism in this country that we've all been lulled into ignoring for far too long: that for a mercifully small faction of whites, there will always be questions regarding the legitimacy of black achievement, whatever it may be. That any black person who earns the right to play in the sandbox with whites are only there because of some perceived unfair advantage. That no matter what the achievement, no matter how great the accomplishment, to them, blacks will simply never be good enough.